And the red light is on.
Yep, it's live, or the studio is.
Getting ready to go on for our Ask Me Anything live chat. Bob Harris here, Emil Kadlec. Talk about news, your drafts. So stick around for a few minutes, and as soon as the YouTube video goes live and we get everything shared and out there in front of the world, we'll start this show. Where'd our red light go? The red light went away for me.
Yeah, let's take a
Or
look.
the red dot on the YouTube.
Nope, it's fine.
All right. It does that. I've seen it do. Yeah, there it's back. Talk a little bit about how far Kamara fell in that last night's draft and how silly everyone should feel today.
Yeah. Yeah, what did I get him? I was a 10 team, and I got him at the 8th pick.
8th, yeah.
Says Yuba is not receiving enough video maintaining smooth streaming, so it's having a little
Yeah, we're
difficulty.
not live as of yet. My red lights just went out.
Refresh. Well, it's running, so I guess it's fine.
All right. Red light is back on. Still don't see us live. Oh, yeah, one.
Interesting.
As we await the going live, putting in a little update there.
Yeah. It's having trouble.
There we go.
All right.
Howdy, kids. Yeah, we've been standing here not seeing us live, so that happens. Thanks for coming by. All kinds of stuff going on here. We'll get a little bit in the chat. Thank you for letting us know we're live. We just can't see you letting us know we're live until we're actually live. The conundrum of the video live streaming. But we're here now, and we appreciate you coming by and letting us know. And as always, we'll be here for the next hour or so answering your questions. It's draft weekend for most everybody. If you haven't already drafted, you're probably fixing to. We got some news and stuff we can grind on between questions or around questions or to help answer questions. A couple of things to, just get the ball rolling right off the bat is the two announcements at quarterback. Tyrod Taylor officially named the starter for the Los Angeles Chargers, and Dwayne Haskins officially named the Week 1 starter. No surprises there. Everything we expected. Haskins has been, playing with confidence. If you listen to the reporting that's been going on there, and already has been getting some questions, so we'll get started here. First question is, your thoughts on Todd Gurley? And it's interesting. I talked to Marshall Falk last night. He was a good player, maybe a good judge of players, also a good fantasy player. He is in many fantasy leagues. And he has big expectations for Gurley. I have a big expectation for workload. And I think of those guys that are going off in that third round, that range of running backs that seem to be workload dependent. I really like Chris Carson, but I also like Todd Gurley. I think he's in a good position. I don't think he's overpriced. And is there a little risk involved? Yes. The knee is always a concern, as Marshall Faulk indicated. But with guys like Aaron Connor going a little before, or James Conner, going a little before him, David Johnson going a little before him, I think he's a good play. Emil, your thoughts?
Gurley? I'm still worried about him. Obviously, he's a good play, but you're having to take him, relatively high. Obviously, we still talk about the great ceiling that he's had. But I haven't gotten him a lot because I kind of let everybody else take him. If he drops a little, then I'm more interested in him. And typically, he doesn't drop to me.
Who do you prefer in that range? And let's say we're going into that range, and we're going to call it, the Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones tier after that top tier. Then you get into the James Conner, Chris Carson, David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Jonathan Taylor, Leonard Fournette, who will obviously drop, and we'll talk about more. Le'Veon Bell, Melvin Gordon. I think that Mark Ingram and Devin Singletary kind of falling out into the next tier for me. Do you like any of those guys more than you like Gurley?
Well, I like getting Chris Carson, because he usually slips. He usually slips a little farther than I have him ranked. I have him ranked pretty high up there. Looking at an old scratched up sheet, I have him, right around 12 or so. In a non-PPR, he's like 11th without catches. So he's a nice guy to grab. And of course, I occasionally get Jonathan Taylor because, he'll fall to me. So, Aaron Jones, obviously, we've been worried about him, but I don't think we should be worried about him. Obviously, we're not expecting that 19 touchdowns, etc. But in that area, he's a great pick.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think Nick Chubb is as well. We're kind of down on him. Obviously, the concerns that Kareem Hunt, but from the practice reporting so far, those two haven't been on the field at the same time, and Chubb is the clear-cut number one. So we'll see how much they split up that workload. Jeff Clark has a question, Emil. His dynasty quarterbacks are Lamar Jackson, Carson Wentz, Drew Lock, Phil Rivers, Cam Newton. Any rookies worth dropping one for? Well, sure. I could be okay dropping Rivers, and I might be okay dropping Newton depending on who I could get. And I'm assuming you don't mean Joe Burrow. So if you want to throw the list out there of guys that are available, I'd be a little. We could dial in a little more. There's some other guys that are obviously viable as well. Tua is the other frontline guy, but if it's someone later, let us know. David Giglione wants to know if Jamison Crowder, you can correct my pronunciation, David. Apologies if I butchered that. Is Jamison Crowder a decent number 2 wide receiver if your 3 backs are Derrick Henry, Kenyon Drake, and Miles Sanders? Yeah, that's a pretty high floor group. Emil, you can address this, but I think Crowder is a great. Ideally he's a wide receiver 3, but I think in this case you have a lot of room to work around there with those running backs if you could start them all.
Yeah, that's a great start. I'm assuming it's PPR. Hopefully it's PPR because that helps Jameson a lot. But you can't have it all, and if you're going to get that solid of a running back trio, then yeah, Jameson's a good number 2, and there's some other guys hopefully you'll get to help Jameson out.
Yeah, I would go ahead and I think that's, for me, Crowder is a guy that is, given his price, and I'm getting him usually in the 9th, 10th round. Maybe he goes a little earlier in some leagues, but maybe he's growing on people. So yeah, in PPR, I think you can survive that. And there's a ton of value at wide receiver in drafts, even in that range and beyond. If I could, throw some names out there. If you haven't drafted yet, if you're plotting this or you're in the middle of this draft, once you get down past that area, in that same range, Marvin Jones is available. I could play Henry Ruggs, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Christian Kirk, Deshaun Jackson going later than that, Preston Williams. So there's no shortage of available talent there below Crowder as well. So dive in. Okay, Jeff Clark, Dynasty defenses. Ravens, Saints, Bears, please rank in order. I'd probably go in that order. I mean, you could hope the Bears rebound a little bit. So, but that seems like a solid order. The Saints have been playing great defense the last couple of years.
Ditto
The
on
Ravens,
that. I love Baltimore at home. I just love streaming
yeah.
them or using them on those situations.
Mark Brady would like to know Mostert or Jonathan Taylor half point PPR. I'm all Taylor. I will go full round fuller, and I think that's kind of ADP is reflective of that. You'll see Mostert going maybe around the 5th round, Taylor going late 3rd, early 4th. So I'm following. I'm fine with that as well. I do think maybe we see Marlon Mack early, but I'm not like totally worried about it. I think Taylor's going to take over that role. There's been some real positive reporting from practice. Love the offensive line. He's built for that offense. Emil?
Well, Mozart, I like the guy, and he has some great times. But as we've talked before, you've got a kind of a three-headed marker. If McKinnon comes in and plays, you got Telvin, and pardon me, I got to hit my mute. And so, he may have a few great games, and then next thing you know, he's sharing the ball. I'd rather take Taylor and try and get through the first few games and see when he can take over. I think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to be pedantic here because it's neither here nor there. We saw what Mostert did down the stretch last year. He's also never started a game at running back. He always comes in off the bench, and it's still Coleman in the mix. There's going to be Jerick McKinnon in the mix. I know there are guys in the mix with Taylor as well. I just look at the investment. They did invest a little more in Mostert. So, but I'm looking at that ADP. Emil, 10-man PPR redraft. He drafted Dak and Baker Mayfield. Should he dump Mayfield for Burrows for upside? Also, I drafted Kenyon Drake as running back 2, drafted Moss running back 4. Should I dump Moss for Chase? No, you should not on the latter. Emil, are you really worried about the quarterback situation in 10-team? I mean, Burrow's got enough upside to make you want to switch out for Mayfield? I think they both have plenty of upside.
They got plenty of upside. Just wait and see. It's a 10-team league. If it's a one quarterback start, you should be able to ride what you got and just relax for a week and see what happens week 1 and week 2.
Yep, and here's a question that I wanted to get to because, the news is obvious. Alvin Kamara, all the reporting yesterday, open to trading, open to being traded, wants a lot more money than the Saints want to give him. All that's gone away, and today he's back with the team. They're close on a deal. Something should be done by Monday. So the question is, if Kamara falls to him at 8 and 9 PPR drafts, is he worth the risk? He'll still have Le'Veon Bell stress disorder from a couple of years ago. It's understandable. So
well, that's understandable. Last night I took Kamara with the 8th pick in a 10-team league before all the good news, because I just had a feeling it was an emotional thing. I felt like perhaps the team, New Orleans, was trying to play a little strategy, saying, "Oh yeah, we can trade him." There's a lot of strategy going on when you're doing negotiations, even when we're coming up within 8 days of the season start. And hopefully it's gone away, but I would take that risk. That's worth the risk because I think it's a lot of manipulation going on right now. Strategies for negotiation.
Jeff Clark would like to know in a dynasty league if we would keep Benny Snell or Devonta Freeman. Devonta Freeman not on the team. Benny Snell is. I mean, I don't think. Let me put it this way, and you know that I'm not trying to be a smartass, Jeff. But I think that is the starting point. And I guess the question is, do I think Freeman can show up somewhere and be more of a factor than Benny Snell? And I think Snell's value is primarily if something happens to James Conner. And he is the next man up there. So he is second in line. If you have James Conner, it would be easy, super easy call for me to say Benny Snell. I would probably lean Snell either way because I don't know if Devonta Freeman has priced himself out of work. And now that Leonard Fournette's on the market, I'm less certain that he'll find a job. Maybe it'll take until there's an injury to somebody. That's possible. Or maybe his price will come down and he'll get a job. Emil?
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I think about the whole thing.
Yeah. All right. So do we have Willie Scott, here's the Jaguars are tanking. Is anyone there worth drafting? Sure. Gardner Minshew's worth drafting under the right circumstances. DJ Chark, totally worth drafting. The running backs, Raquel Armstead and Divine Ozigbo, Chris Thompson, all worth drafting at the appropriate time. LaVisca Chenault in deep leagues might be worth a flyer. So, yeah, whether they're tanking or not, I don't know. I'm not a big believer in the tanking theory, but they've gotten rid of a lot of guys, so I understand why that is out there. But still plenty of guys, and the cheaper they get, the more I'd be interested in them, Emil.
Well, if you're tanking, let's say I don't believe it either, but let's say you're semi-tanking, you're developing, well, maybe you're going to be behind a little. Well, what happens when you're behind? You're on offense a lot, you're throwing the ball a lot. So all those guys you mentioned, like the deep league with Chenault's another, even that guy is probably worth taking in deep leagues. So I would take advantage of that. Remember, weren't we talking about Miami last year, tanking?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to bring that up.
What happened to Devontae Parker? He was a top 5 receiver in the second half of the season. So I don't get too emotional about it. It can work in your favor, even if it is true that they're rebuilding.
Yeah. And, we'll see. I'm not buying into that. So any clarity on the Washington backfield at this point? Yes, until Leonard Fournette shows up, Timothy Miller. And we'll see. They could have claimed him on waivers. They had the second waiver pick, so they didn't do that. Didn't want to pay him the $4 million. But right now, it looks like Adrian Peterson is the lead, with Antonio Gibson playing a role as kind of an all-purpose weapon. J.D. McKissick sounds like he's going to be in the mix. Sounds like a guy who might be odd man out eventually. Maybe between Peyton Barber and Bryce Love. So, but I think right now I've been drafting Adrian Peterson in that double-digit range as maybe a guy that gives you, if you need a solid floor guy, just to cover you for a week. And if you need a little upside play, depending on your roster construction, I think Antonio Gibson, watch some of the footage from his practices this week. He looked very busy and very good. So an intriguing play. It's just that 7th-round price tag worries me a little bit. But
if you're Washington, are you rebuilding, or do you really want to win now? You got a couple of young guys. You've got Peterson, who's a pretty good, experienced player, obviously. Are you willing? Do you want to bring in an Leonard Fournette? Or do you want to just play with what you got? Unless you don't trust what you got and that you need depth.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, they just signed Adrian Peterson last year to a 2-year extension. So, I think they feel comfortable with him. I don't know if the new staff is as comfortable. I don't think anyone wants to pay Leonard Fournette $4 million. So that's why he's not on a team right now. We'll see in the coming days if he hooks up with somebody. The teams that haven't talked about Leonard Fournette or have talked about him, the Rams say they're not interested. The Bears say they're not interested. The Patriots say they're not interested. So those are the teams kind of on the record about it. So we'll see. JB Frost, sounds like Deebo Samuel is back. Where do you have him ranked? I remain skeptical. I'd probably still have him ranked about where his ADP is, which is 8th round. I'm not drafting a hell of a lot of him because I don't know that he's back. I know he's back running, but he hasn't practiced yet. The prognosis after surgery was 10 to 16 weeks. So week 1 is 10 weeks. So I'm hoping he's pushing that envelope. But it wouldn't shock me either way. If he opened the season on PUP and missed the first 6 games, then gets the 3-week window, that wouldn't surprise me. If he's available week 1 but doesn't really do much, I think we'll see the same thing with Alshon Jeffrey. He'll avoid PUP but not really be ready to play week 1. That wouldn't surprise me either. So I just think there's so many receivers in that range that I feel comfortable drafting that I haven't drafted him much. But that's where he's going, and that's pretty much where I have him ranked. Emil?
Yeah, I've got him 44, and I have the same thing. He's going a little too quickly for my blood, so I basically don't have him. Hard thing to understand. We really don't know when he comes back. When he comes back, is he really in game shape? And he did look good last year, but there's just a lot of unknowns and a lot of concerns, so I'd let him go, unless you can get him later than that.
All right. We have a question from David Brittany Coleman. Thank you. One more. Has A.J. Green as a wide receiver 4? Still excited by him with Crowder, Deontay Johnson, Deebo, Justin. Yes, I'm still excited about him. Look, and it's a gamble, but it's a cheap gamble. And if he turns back into the guy that he has been in the past, I know he hasn't been that for 2 years, but we haven't seen much of him. The early reporting from camp was positive before the hamstring happened, so I'm willing to roll the dice on that, especially with the glowing reports of Joe Burrow. Emil, 7th round, Slayton, Ayuk, or Hayden Hurst?
I'd probably go Slayton, but I realize he's not starting right now over Shepard, and if Shepard stays healthy, he'll be a second guy. And of course, you got other guys there, Golden Tate, and and Hayden Hurst is not a bad position there. I'd have to kind of see what else is there, but there's still a lot of players a little later on, so I would kind of consider Hurst in that position, depending on what else is going in your draft and what other tight ends are still available.
Thomas E. has used the configurable cheat sheet every year. Bill and the staff have Clyde Edwards-Helaire very low. We should probably address that. I have him very high. I probably have him maybe not as high as the world, but I have him in the top 10. I have him number 7. I think I prefer Joe Mixon a little bit. He keeps going, and he will go in the top 10. You're going to need to draft him there.
Yeah, I think I've got him ranked as the 9th running back, which probably puts him at the the end of the first round of the first or two. But like you said, he's hot right now, and maybe I've got him a little low. I'm kind of lagging a little. I just don't like it all, but I do see the talent, and I probably should move him up a bit. So
yeah, we always have this discussion. We're drafting this guy at his ceiling, sight unseen, but the truth is we draft pretty much everyone at their ceiling going in the first round or two. So maybe we should push him up there. But again, on my rankings, if you check, you'll see him fairly high, and I think on Emil's as well. So what's really going on with Mixon? Nothing. He got paid. He got a $48 million contract extension yesterday. So the migraines go away and everything is good.
Now we found out for the best medicine for a migraine. Money.
There's no doubt about that. Kamara maybe has a little thing with his back too that'll go away when he gets paid.
Yes.
So those are both, the Mixon thing was interesting. I think the thing that's most interesting about this is just watching the immediate fluctuation of the values of these guys. I haven't moved either of them in my rankings, and I won't move either of them in my rankings. I didn't move Dalvin Cook ever in my rankings because generally these things get done. And I say generally, we had the comment earlier about, Le'Veon Bell. And, we saw it with Melvin Gordon, too. He held out longer, and a lot of people thought he wouldn't. So I would agree. All right. So I've heard a lot of back and forth over Austin Eckler. Do you think he'll have the kind of role he had last year with all those receptions, or where he just because Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly? I think the offense is designed for him to have a bigger to have the role he had last year. I think part of that, though, was his connection with Phillip Rivers. Rivers seemed to look at him endlessly and especially at the times when it mattered most. So, I'm a little concerned. Is he going to catch all 92 of his targets? That was pretty phenomenal. I'm not sure that that's redoable, but I'm not sure it has to be, right? So, look, if we get 90% of Austin Eckler, we'd be pretty happy with that, I think. It was a super season last year. And I don't think it's worries about the Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly. I just think it's more of will the role remain the same. Do you feel a little differently about that, Emil?
No, I feel pretty good about that. It's a worry, but I think he'll do that. I think like I said, 90% of him is damn good. You're getting him in middle of the second round. He's the experienced guy in that backfield. You don't have Gordon around anymore. You have these younger guys. Okay, you got a different quarterback, but that guy's got a good experience. They know that quarterback. They prepared him, and I think they believe that he'll be able to, Tyrod Taylor will be able to carry the load, and maybe until the rookie gets a chance. So I wouldn't worry about it that much. I think you're good.
All right, and Timothy Miller thinks Edwards-Helaire worries him at his ADP. I would agree. There are more solid plays or guys that I think are that I'm more comfortable drafting. And if I'm drafting right in the spot where he goes, I'm not averse to switching to Michael Thomas at that pick, or Derrick Henry, or whoever. So people who would like to avoid him. There's ample draft capital there to do it. It just kind of depends on where you fall. And I've seen him go as late as the end of the first round. Just also seen him go as early as 5. So it'll be interesting. Okay, Thomas, we'll get on those updates. In the meantime, you could use my cheat sheet or emails if you're having an issue with the ones you don't like. Will David Johnson become an RB1 again? He has the role to become an RB1 again. Whether he delivers, I mean, you can look back at those first 6 games last year before he was hurt and see that he was pretty effective in the Arizona offense. You can look back at last year's Houston offense and see that Carlos Hyde was pretty, not RB1, but pretty solid play. So, I mean, you can kind of drive down the lane and talk yourself into a couple different versions of this. And the best case is, yes, he reemerges as a running back 1 just based in part on that role and the touches that are available there. The good news is you don't have to draft him as that. You can draft him as as well into the 3rd round. So there's that. Hello, the Fantasy Football Show. How are you? Tony Lasso, can we talk about the Eagles wide receiver? Who is top tier in that group? And do you see Alshon Jeffries coming back this season? I do see Alshon Jeffries coming back this season. Based on Adam Kaplan, Jeff Mosier from InsideTheBirds.com, both have said they think he'll avoid the PUP list. Even if he doesn't, I think he'd be back after week 6. But assuming he avoids the PUP list, and you can, that doesn't mean he'll play week 1, but it does mean he'll play at some point, probably early on in the season if they avoid the PUP. So I'm not a big fan of Jalen Reagor. I think Deshaun Jackson in the 11th round looks damn appealing to me. Beyond that, it's kind of dicey, I think. Emil, is there anyone there you take it a shine to?
It's a very confusing situation, and it's good to, Deshaun Jackson, played 1 game last year, and that was it. But the 1 game was pretty good. So his ADP is extremely low, and you can get him cheap. And perhaps he'll be doing a lot before Alshon comes in. And then you can get Alshon really cheap too right now. So maybe you could take both those guys, but you're having to take 2 guys on a team to hope it works out. But maybe you'll really get some real value there with some very low picks in your draft.
Well, we saw last year, and so Reagor seems almost certain to miss week 1, and maybe a little bit beyond. John Hightower's drawn some buzz. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside has looked a little better than he would last year. It's a low bar. I mean, he should look better. But, man, I don't know if you can count on any of those guys. And I also feel like last year when they went down and wide receivers were an issue, Greg Ward popped up. But they leaned more heavily on the tight ends and the running back. Miles Sanders, that was part of his late season run, was that he was their best playmaker down the field. So I'm not diving in too deep, people. I do like Jeffries as a last round, 15th, 16th, 17th round guy in best balls, and I don't mind Deshaun Jackson in that 11th round because if he doesn't stay healthy, I can just move on. Steve Lindor, 12-point PPR and PPR point per completion. He's picking second, so Barkley would be his plan. And he wants to know which 2 to keep. So Moore in the 4th round, I like that. Russell Wilson in the 7th, I like that. Michael Gallup in the 12th, I like even better. Ronald Jones in the 17th is great. Look, all these values are great. If I had to keep you get 2 of those. I'm probably going to keep Moore in the 4th, and I'm probably keeping Gallup in the 12th. But you can make arguments for any of those other guys if you have personal preferences. I'd probably lay off Harry and I think the running backs, great value on Ronald Jones, and I think he'll be the starter. I just not sure I have faith in how long he'll be the starter.
Boy, you got a lot of options there, and they're great options. You're in a really good position.
Yeah, and really good values on all of them. I think that's always usually the thing that makes these things easy to kind of work our way through is that the values you don't usually find someone with that many great values.
There's almost no wrong answer when you're looking at how, even with he's got Deontay Johnson, Slayton, 17th rounds.
Damian Harris, Harry. Like I said, Harry's the only guy I'd probably lay off completely in this bunch, given the others you have.
Yep.
But I'd probably lay off Wilson just because you have so much value at the other positions. I think you can get by a quarterback. Steve, I think I'm punting on this one. This is like a personal preference one, honestly. I know which 2 I would keep, and it would be Moore and probably Gallup. But there are cheaper options there that may come up really good for you. Jimmy Tupper wants to know if we should be starting Kittle and Crowder week 1 with injury concerns. I didn't see Crowder with an injury. I think everyone else there is injured. So he's kind of been the constant there. And anything he's had, I haven't seen anything today. Let me look. I had a note on their injuries from today, so I'll double check. But any thoughts on Kittle? Kittle's dealing with a little bit of a hamstring. I think they're just preserving him. And also, I don't make week one lineup decisions until week one because lots of things could happen. So you're kind of, getting a little bit in front of this for me. Let's see on Crowder. Crowder was I haven't seen an injury for Crowder. So, yep, I don't see anything. He's practicing. He's not on their injury report for today. So.
Well, you're going to know, like you said, you're going to know a lot before you have to make your decision. So you're going to just have to wait and make your decision when you got more data closer to the game.
All right. Graham has an Eckler follow. And watch your flash update next week, Jimmy. That's where we get into the detailed situations. Graham, Eckler follow-up. Where do you rank him? Eckler follow-up. I have Sanders higher, and I have Eckler higher than Jones in PPR. And I think that's a pretty easy situation. So, Miles Sanders, Austin Eckler, and Aaron Jones. Emil, how do you rank them in PPR?
Well, I probably have Jones higher, and then Sanders, Jones, and Eckler. But they're pretty darn close. Of course, Sanders is in the first round, and Eckler's in the middle second round. So.
All right, Cosmo, what's the status of the Rams running back situation right now? Number one, they're not interested in Leonard Fournette, so says Sean McVay. Cam Akers, from what I've been told by the people who cover the team on the ground, talked to Jordan Rodriguez from The Athletic about 2 weeks ago, and she felt like Cam Akers, it's going to be a committee early in the season. Darrell Henderson should be back in the mix, but he does have a little bit of a hamstring issue, so maybe he's slow to start. Malcolm Brown maybe, is going to be certainly going to be in the mix. Her thought was that Akers is not going to take over the full-time role until the middle of the season. Marshall Falk, who I talked to again yesterday, just to be a name dropper, asked him about him, so I just wanted to share what he said, is that he feels like that Akers is going to be the guy that he ran behind when I was the offensive line in college. He can certainly do it now. So he's a little more optimistic about Akers. But that's where it stands right now. It looks like a committee to open the season. Malcolm Brown, to me, seems like a great best ball, last-round guy, just catching a touchdown, get a touch to short yardage situations, touchdowns. And thanks for those bold predictions, the Fantasy Football Show. I want the top 10 running backs. We're not that far, but it's going to take an injury, I think. But he was better than everyone thinks last year. There's no doubt about that.
He said question mark, so I don't know if it was a question or he was making a statement.
Yeah, either or. I mean,
the nice thing about Kareem Hunt is you can take him fairly. You can get him almost as a number 3 running back. And if he performs as an RB2, even a mid RB2, which he did last year after he came back, you got value. Do you expect him to hit the top 10? You don't need to get value.
Yeah, I think that's the play. And obviously, I think it would take an injury for it to happen. Timothy Miller, does Darren Waller take a step back this year with the additions of Witten and all the young receivers? Not sure if Moreau is still there. Moreau is still there and coming back and practicing, and he's fine. He had a knee injury last year. So that's the question about Waller. If you're drafting him as like the 5th or 6th tight end off the board, are you counting on that same kind of target share? And it concerns me a little bit. So I've been avoiding him, thinking he could do better as a touchdown catcher or at least a scoring factor, becoming a factor in the scoring part of that offense, maybe especially with Tyrell Williams out. So we were going to talk about that a little bit. Tyrell Williams did go on IR, so that kind of opens the door for the young receivers to step up. I think, Henry Ruggs was probably going to be a starter anyway. Now maybe Brian Edwards, who's really getting some good run in practice. Nelson Aguilar's there. Hunter Renfro's still there. So they have a ton of weapons. I don't know if Witten worries me. I just think in general it's the additional weapons. So drafting him where he's going right now has not been something I'm doing. Emil?
I don't know how much Tyrell Williams is really going to be a factor in that whole offense, but he was last year. He's left, and now you got 2 rookie wide receivers that are going to play a lot, if not start. That's asking a lot. So perhaps Waller may be getting more targets in this offense this year because you got 2 rookies, quote unquote, starting. I liked Hunter last year. I thought he looked really good at the end of the year. And pardon the dog in the background. Don't you love it? So I don't know. Waller's been kind of falling a little bit. And I think you can take advantage of that. There is a lot of other tight ends, but I wouldn't feel that bad as getting into like the 6th or 7th tight end.
Yeah, I'm looking at the current
Let me
ADP right
close
now,
this
and he
door.
has fallen a little bit, like 6th round. It's a little pricier than I want to pay, but I think there'll still be considerable volume. I would like to see the touchdowns better, but there are tight ends I like much later who I feel pretty good about as well. So Graham wants to know how confident I am in Devontae Parker building on what he did the second half of last season, and what round are you comfortably taking him? I'm comfortably taking him at his ADP for sure, which is 6th round. Man, I think that's crazy. I'll reach up around for that. As a matter of fact, I feel pretty confident. It seemed like he turned the corner. He beat the pants off some really good cornerbacks in the process. Stephon Gilmore, Tre'Davious White, others. And just, so what I heard from training camp last week or two from people on the ground was that he looks like he's picked up right where he's left off. Preston Williams also looks very good. And, I know some people are saying, well, Parker's rise came after pretty much Williams was hurt. And that's pretty much true. But also, I don't think it was, I don't think one was the cause of the other. I think, Parker just was finally, figuring out his game. Changing coaching staff, I think, made a big difference for him, especially in the things he needed to do off the field to get better. So I'm comfortably taking him, very comfortably taking him to the 6th, not afraid to reach up. Emil, how do you feel about Devontae Parker?
Well, he was a top 5 wide receiver last year with Preston Williams out. So let's say he's the 13th best receiver this year with Preston in, and he doesn't get as much. He's a great value. He's going as like the 20th wide receiver. So he's still got value, even if he ends up being just a low wide receiver 1.
Yeah, he's actually going as 28th off the board right now. There's a range right there of guys that I really love. Marquise Brown in that 6th round, or late 5th round, Devontae Parker, A.J. Green, the middle of the 6th round, Will Parker in the 6th round, Michael Gallup finishing out that round. I think, I don't think you can go wrong with any of those guys at the price. Tony wants to know if we also do cheat sheets for TDs only scoring. Yes, we have a configurable cheat sheet where you can set your own scoring system and roster parameters, so that'll help you out. Graham, defenses, special teams versus kicker. Which do you draft first? In his league, the top defenses, special teams start coming off the board in the 8th and 9th rounds. So I try to grab one or wait. I never grab kickers or defenses until the very end of the last 2 rounds of my draft. And I generally go on defenses, the team with the most disruptive playmakers and the latest buy. It's almost, by feel about what's left, because I'm not, getting one of those early ones. And I get, like last year, if you had the Patriots and, there are defenses that do extremely well. I think it's kind of hard to predict defenses that are going to score like that. So, and with the kicker, I do the same thing. I don't want to have to mess around with them on the waiver wire. So I find somebody with a late buy and a good offense. Yes, it's that simple for me.
And I take defenses a little earlier because there's a little more stability in a defense. And I just wouldn't take a kicker or a defense that early, 8th or 9th round. There should be too much value there. If there's going to be some late defenses and kickers you can take, you're the second to last round or the last round, and then watch if you don't get the greatest one or you don't even know yet, because when week 1 and 2 comes up, you may find out you got the best guy. So watch those 2 spots, the kickers and the defenses, in the first few weeks, and make a change if you can. And then in the 8th and 9th and 10th round, you're taking running backs, receivers, and tight ends, maybe a second quarterback, and you're going to be better off, a lot better off.
I agree with that. And basically, Graham, I guess what I'm saying is those are streamable positions for me, and I'm perfectly comfortable doing that. If you're not, and you feel like you want one of those top defenses with the rest of them are going off, your league, and if it's that 8th, 9th round, you want one of those top 5s. We do have rankings for the defense, so check it and work along those lines. David wants to know if Keyshawn Vaughn has good long-term dynasty value since since Jones is bound to piss off Brady. Ronald Jones is bound to piss off Brady. I'm reading about Van Jefferson as I'm reading that question. So I don't know that Ronald Jones is bound to piss off Brady, but he could. He was been dropping passes in camp from time, but so is Vaughn. So in Dynasty, I don't know if any running back has good long-term value. Unless they come into a truly established role or they come in with that kind of pedigree, you know, whether it's a Jonathan Taylor or in the past, the Barkleys, Ezekiel Elliott's, Christian McCaffrey's. Yeah, I mean, those top tier guys are the ones that I invested in Dynasty. And otherwise, I kind of am focusing my resources on receivers. And so I mean, no, I don't think he has good long-term value. I mean, I think he has long-term dynasty value. And, you know, as much as a running back can that's in his situation. I don't mean to downplay it, but I'm just not optimistic about the long term. The fact that he came in and he's off to a slow start is not really the concern. And if you want to slow roll him, I think the value is down the road and not this year. I don't know if you agree with that, Emil.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, there's a lot of running backs who, you know, had trouble in their first camp, didn't do a lot, and then the second, third year they became quite productive. So I wouldn't, like you said, well stated, I wouldn't take that, you know, too negatively.
Timothy Miller, do we think Nick Foles will be the long-term starter in Chicago? He's bounced around the league, never really kept the job. He believes they're lighting Trubisky's fire. Myself, I believe Ryan Pace, the general manager there, who traded up to draft Trubisky ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, needs Mitchell Trubisky to become something. So he gets every opportunity to start. I think Nick Foles really has to truly outplay him. That said, Nick Foles has a lot of connections to the coaching staff right now. Nagy, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback's coach, all have worked with him in the past. So, I mean, they're comfortable with him if it comes to that. But honestly, they have to want Trubisky to play because they're invested in him. And we'll see. I mean, you know, we'll see how it plays out. I'm not investing in either quarterback. I think either of them can keep the guys I'm interested in there, most notably Allen Robinson. In business, because Trubisky has done it the last 2 years, playing alternately okay and then kind of bad. So that's where I'm at. Do you expect Foles to take over at some point? Do you see Trubisky making some kind of leap?
I don't see Trubisky making much of a leap, but I totally agree with you. They want him to succeed. You know, we may end up them flopping around several times during the year. Foles is a weird guy. He's had just great times, won a Super Bowl, and then just been floundering. He's a guy, I think he needs time to really get going. And, you know, he missed most of the year last year with the injury. I'm completely confused at what's going to go on. I think Foles has higher potential. I think Trubisky's just shown he just doesn't see the field well. He just wasn't what they thought he was, and I don't know if he can really get better. So.
Well, he can be athletic, okay? And we saw him better the year before last. So he has good running ability if they can design some plays for him. I think the bigger issue for me is, you know, Nick Foles has come off the bench before. He's okay with that. I don't know if Trubisky's, you know, I don't know if they want to, you know, take a chance and say, okay, we start out with Foles, and if he's horrible, we bring in Trubisky. It makes sense to do it the other way around, but it'll all play out in the next week or so. I hope you're not drafting or relying on either of them. Jimmy Tupper wants to know, Emil was higher on Nick Chubb during his rookie year than the consensus, and rightfully so. How do you, Emil, view Chubb this year with Hunt limiting his upside? Is he being overlooked in drafts or at least undervalued?
Yeah, and I loved Chubb last year. It was incredible what potential he has. But when Hunt came in, week 10 and week 16 last year, they were almost the same. Chubb was like running back 21 or 22, and Hunt was like running back 25. So they were all both those guys were performing as a number 2 running back last year. Now, I hope Chubb does better this year, but that concerns me. And, you know, it's just real data, and I don't know if it's going to change. Hunt's a pretty damn good player, and they want to use him. So I think Chubb's hurt by Hunt.
Yeah, I think he probably is. I also think he's one of the best runners in the NFL, just pure runners. And I'm guessing Kevin Stefanski will figure out ways to maximize that with the scheme. They have a good offensive line, or upgraded offensive line at least. So I think he's not being overlooked. I think he's still going where he needs to go just based on the situation. But I think he could outperform that value. Graham did a mock draft, 10-team PPR. Had pick 2. He took Barkley, Mahomes, Eckler, Andrews as his first 4. And the wide receivers to start out with were Ridley and Parker. So no real wide receiver 1. Would you be happy or unhappy with that to start a roster? I would be ecstatic to start with that as a roster. because, again, I think Parker was a wide receiver one last year. You didn't have to draft him or pay that kind of capital to find out if he can do it again. I'm guessing you got some solid depth at receiver later on as well, because it's a 10-team league. So I'm finding a lot of depth at wide receiver. I'm very comfortable with well into the double digits finding wide receiver talent that I feel at least comfortable with, if not supremely confident in. And I think as the season wears on, I think you can find guys on the waiver wire to do that. Emil, in a dynasty league, Anthony Miller or James Washington or N'Keal Harry?
Whoa.
All
I
equal
would go
value.
Anthony Miller until we see more with N'Keal Harry. And there's too many players in Washington to keep James Washington over those two guys.
Pittsburgh. He's in Pittsburgh. So, James Washington, I think, has kind of become the forgotten commodity there with Deontay Johnson's rise. Everyone expects Juju to rebound. Now we're hearing Chase Claypool is doing great. I think in a redraft, throwing a late-round pick at James Washington is okay, because remember last year when he was, that year's Deontay Washington, and that passing attack became derailed. Jeff, I think if this was me and this was like the tail end of my wide receiving core, I would probably take a chance on Harry, just keeping him based on what the draft capital the Patriots invested in him. But if you need a floor player, we saw what Anthony Miller could be last year. He had a 5-game stretch where he was a solid wide receiver too before he got hurt playing with a lousy quarterback. So, and that was with Allen Robinson there. So, I think it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. Miller, if you need a guy that can come in, if you think, wow, I'm going to need him some weeks, I think it would be more likely to be Miller. Harry, we're not hearing great things. I mean, it's kind of been up and down in practice, but there's a lot of draft capital invested in him. He's a big body. He may be one of those guys who just never gets it, right? We see that from time to time. So hoping that he can become something I think would be worth stashing him if it's the very end of your bench and you don't think you're going to need him this year. If you think you're going to need him this year, Miller's the better play. All right.
Well put.
Keep the questions coming if you have them. We're going to talk about a few newsy items. I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, we had a couple quarterbacks announcements today. The Chargers announced that Tyrod Taylor will be the starter week 1. No surprise there, nor is there a surprise with the Washington football team officially naming Dwayne Haskins their starter week 1. So adjust your strategy accordingly. We had Joe Mixon signed a new contract yesterday. Makes him, not the highest paid running back, not the lowest paid. He's about $12 million a year, got a $48 million for a year extension. Alvin Kamara sounds like they're trying to work towards a deal by Monday. He is back on the practice field. I just got the notification while we were talking. As expected, he was expected back. He is back. So he's practicing, and they've been talking, and all the talk about a trade and all that kind of stuff seems like a little bit over the top. Chris Carson's back to practice. Pete Carroll heaping praise on him. Carson says he's, back to full speed, 100%, and it sounds like the practices he's looked really good. So a few newsy items there. If you want to keep up with all the news, go to the Football Diehards website. Camp news is there, ongoing, running nonstop, and we'll through pretty much Sunday. We'll dial back a little bit and get ready for the regular season as you're doing your final drafts. We'll be covering any huge news of notice, but we'll kind of, lay off the camp notes a little bit then. But the configurable cheat sheet, the rankings, everything will be updated constantly right up through Thursday's kickoff if people are drafting late. In fact, we go after Emil, right? Because some of the high stakers draft after the Thursday game still.
Exactly.
So we'll have all that. If you're not familiar, go to the website, footballdiehards.com/free trial, and check it out. If you just want to buy it and you think, wow, this is the best thing ever, use the promo code Diehards to get a 15% discount. Highly recommend this as someone who makes it. Tony Lasswell, will you be doing a fantasy league with the fans this year? I would love to test your skills. We've done a number of them already for the Sirius show. Don't know if we'll be doing any in season. We're trying to get together, find a place we can do some best balls, because I'm in so many leagues already, and I know Emil is as well. It's hard to add leagues, so we're trying to find some fast best balls. We used the draft app last year and kind of did a draft of Palooza on the air. Not sure we're going to do that this year because we're not finding a good app. So maybe not, Tony. I'm not sure. Tom C., a significant amount of solid quarterbacks have dropped below the 10th round, even Aaron Rodgers. What are your thoughts on Rodgers for fantasy this year? I was hearing someone, Nate Burleson was talking about it this morning. It says, we always, get all excited about, Aaron Rodgers. They bring in Jordan Love. We get caught up in all that. Aaron Rodgers is moving on. He says he's watched the practice film and he sees an angry Aaron Rodgers. He says, you know about Aaron Rodgers? He comes out and when he's happy, he's smiling and he surgically destroys you. When he's mad, he frowns and does the same thing. Surgically destroys you. I think there's, questions about the weapons there. But, there were questions last year. And Devontae Adams missed, 4 games. Aaron Rodgers still threw for 4,000 yards and plenty of touchdowns. So I do think he's a late-round value. There are guys I like more. I'm not going to lie. Matthew Stafford and there are others. But yeah, I think this, the Aaron Rodgers era being completely over is probably not true. Emil?
Well, his ceiling's kind of low. He's probably a QB1. 4,000 yards is a lot of yards. He just didn't seem to have the umph. They scored 19 rushing touchdowns just with Aaron Jones, and that's a lot of touchdowns to throw away. Now, if that changes a little bit and he gets a few more of those, he's going to bounce up. But I worry about his ceiling. And, if I was trying to have 2 quarterbacks to fill my deep roster, he would be a great one, and then maybe a guy like Baker Mayfield or something who may explode, may not explode, but give you a potential higher ceiling quarterback. But, you got to love Aaron Rodgers, but I worry about the ceiling. I really do.
Right. We need to see some of those other receivers. We're expecting Allen Lazard to be the number 2. There's been some talk they'd like to see other guys move in there. Nobody has up to this point that I'm aware of. But that doesn't mean guys like Equanimeous St. Brown, Marquez Valdez-Scantling more likely can't be bigger contributors. Also, a lot of talk today, last few weeks actually, but more today, that Robert Tonyan is going to be the top tight end there. So we'll watch those Jay Sternberger shares, at least to open the season, maybe more of a streaming option if you want to wait and see what happens with that tight end situation for the Packers. I guess, and you mentioned Jones. I think it was 15 rushing touchdowns. He caught 4. He's a capable receiver as well. But you look at the offense and where Matt LaFleur came from, the Tennessee Titans, they leaned heavily on their running backs. They've added more running backs. So thinking they're going to be run heavy is not a crazy thought, right? So watch for that as well. Robert Woods wants to know, no worries, Steve, we're here. We'll be here another 10 minutes or so get your questions in. We'll stay longer if there's enough questions. Robert Woods, will he be a wide receiver 1? Robert Woods can be a wide receiver 1. I think he's one of those guys that you can get, a little bit later than your buying. Let me look at his current ADP. 4th round ADP, going right after Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, a little before A.J. Brown. Look, I think you could use him as a wide receiver 1 depending on how you build your draft. If you go other directions those first 3 rounds, he's the first guy you get off the board. I think he's a great high floor guy. And again, there are tons of wide receivers you'll get later. Some of the guys that'll still be on the board after you get him, if you're looking for huge upside plays, not only A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, DJ Chark, Tyler Lockett, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Cortland Sutton, T.Y. Hilton, and then you get into the guys that I really like. So, and that 6th round range where I talked about earlier, Marquise Brown, Stephon Diggs, not so much, Devontae Parker, A.J. Green, Will Fuller, Michael Gallup. So tons of wide receivers still available. If that's where you start drafting your wide receivers, and I think Woods is a great high floor guy to start. I prefer Keenan Allen myself, but he's got to change the quarterback. So.
Yeah, I think Woods would be a great wide receiver 1 to start with, even though he's not really a 1. He's going to get some big games, how they are with the Rams. And like you said, there's a lot of guys to build the overall wide receiver. And obviously, if you are taking him in as your first wide receiver, you've been getting some other players at running back and maybe even a tight end or a quarterback that you're strong at. And I think you can build from there.
Graham wants to know T.Y. Hilton versus Keenan Allen. I'm Team Keenan. I think Tyrod Taylor's better as long as he's the quarterback. He's been better. There was about a 9-game stretch in 2015 where Tyrod Taylor fueled Sammy Watkins as one of the most productive wide receivers of that season over that stretch. So I think Tyrod Taylor's very capable. I think, look, man, Phillip Rivers is capable too, playing behind a good offensive line. So this is kind of one of those where I'd say roster construction is the issue. If T.Y. Hilton is not your first wide receiver and you're looking for a guy with upside, we know he's a big play threat. We've heard there's chemistry with Rivers started early in camp. But if you need a high floor guy, even with the change of quarterbacks, expecting Keenan Allen to be a lesser route runner and unable to get as open as he has in the past, and he's had like 130 targets, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns each of the last 3 years. He stayed healthy, so I think he's a great play. Which would you prefer, Emil, just in a vacuum?
Well, I've got Keenan Allen right now in my rankings at 17, and I've got Hilton at 28, pretty far apart. Obviously, I'm not thrilled about Tyrod Taylor as the quarterback. I'm worried about Hilton's injury issues. They've been getting worse and worse, in my opinion, and that's just got me. I hate to have the hope. We all get here in this time of the year, and we hope, and we forget about all the problems, and we draft guys who have injuries. And I know you're injury agnostic, but I've been laying off of him, and if he falls to me in the right location, I'll take Hilton. But I definitely have Keenan Allen rated much higher this year.
Yeah, just getting a blurb in from Ryan Woods, who works for the Green Bay Press Gazette, that Aaron Rodgers has called Marquez Valdez-Scantling the breakout player of camp. So you can hang your hat on that if you like. Just a little information there. Always good to have. Why is DeAndre Hopkins being somewhat devalued? I know he changed teams, but he's still elite. Yes, he's still elite. But part of what made him so elite was the number of targets he got. And I think people have legitimate questions on if he'll get that same number of targets. But he's only devalued to he's still in the top 5. And the guys he's falling behind are, it's pretty hard to make an argument that he should be ahead of them given the change of team. For me, Emil, do you feel differently about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. I'm worried about him, but it's a new team. There's a lot of unknowns. He was having a little trouble getting open the last couple of years, in my opinion. He's a little small. But, they were double, triple teaming the guy. And if they're creative about getting him open in Arizona, you can get some value there because you can get him a lot later. Well, somewhat later.
Yeah, and that's the thing, leverage it for value. But he's big. He's a big body. But that's the thing. He's got a lot of mouths to feed there in Arizona. So the new piece. Look, I'm not saying you're talking. What if you got 70% of the targets, 80% of the targets? I think that's the only concern for him. David, and again, wide receiver 5 is not hugely devalued. I don't think. I think he's just that he's gone 1 or 2, and you could say a very narrow gap between all those guys as well. QB number 2, Mayfield or Garoppolo, would be Mayfield for me.
Baker Mayfield got too much potential. He's a great quarterback too. He's got all that talent. We've talked about him, and you can get him extremely late. He's a great quarterback too.
And Garoppolo, I think he's capable of making big plays, but they're just, they're more of a run-first offense. Does have some good talent around him, named George Kittle. Jeff Clark, Dynasty, has Kerryon Johnson, and we'll try to draft Swift. Should I just stay away from the Detroit backfield? I think ideally, in an ideal world, it's, that's the plan if you can, but, you can't always. I know they would like to run the ball better, but, man, they seem to be set up to pass, and I know Johnson or Swift has looked good as a receiver, but he's missed some time, so there's concerns about the pass protection. But their defense is lousy, and I worry about their ability to sustain the run with either of those guys, whoever's in there at running back. So I don't think they're unfairly priced, though.
If Swift can catch the ball, you've already invested in Keyshawn Johnson as a dynasty league. He'd be tempting to take, but again, it's the dynamic of the game of the draft. Where do you have to take him? What else is available at that point? Will make you decide what you want to do.
Dynasty question: David Johnson or Raheem Mostert? I'd probably go David Johnson. I think we look at Mostert's emergence last year, and it was super great, right? He was very good. And still, as good as he was late last season, every time I would talk to a 49ers beat writer, they would never commit to saying he's the guy. And I think the reason for that is not that he's not capable of being the guy. It's just Kyle Shanahan is a Shanahan. and he's going to hand Shanahan's somebody their tail if you count on one guy too much. And so, like, not down on Mostert, but he's been kind of a journeyman, mostly a special teams player until last year. So obviously he's in a good scheme that's maximizing his potential. There are also other guys there, Tevin Coleman, whose potential has been maximized. We'll see if Jerick McKinnon could do anything. So, but David Johnson, to me, has that clearer path to workload. I don't think he's going to be sharing as much. Duke Johnson's there. By the way, David Johnson and Duke Johnson, two of the top 10 highest paid running backs in the NFL, both on the Houston Texans. So interesting note there. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. I mean, I don't want to be skeptical of Mostert because he was so good last year, and he's a super nice guy. I talked to him and really like him, but I don't know that I trust the Shanahan. If we had to choose between Bell, David Johnson, or Mostert, there goes my phone. If you had to choose between Bell, David Johnson, or Mostert for your running back two, who would you go with? Are you worried about committee in San Francisco? Yeah, I think we kind of went through that just there. I would probably go David Johnson until I see the Jets' offense improve.
That sounds good to me. There's a lot of worries about both those guys, whether Johnson is, really over the hill or whatnot. But they did give up a lot for him, and I'd probably go with Johnson.
Yeah, Le'Veon Bell in the best shape of his career, and still Frank Gore has looked better, according to at least Brian Costello from the New York Post. And other people have been reporting that, Frank Gore looks great. LaMichael Pirine looked good, but has the ankle sprain now. And I guess the bigger issue for everyone, especially Brian Costello, having talked to him, was not that, Bell wasn't going to be the primary guy, but that if Gore even cuts into his workload a little bit, how mad is Le'Veon Bell's going to be? He likes to have the whole role. So will there be some dissension there in the ranks? And seems interesting. Just a funny story that Costello told us about Gore. He said every time there's a break in practice or any time Gore is not involved in drills, he runs over to the side field and starts running sprints endlessly, which is our friend Marcus Grant calls them. Gore stands for goes on running endlessly. So there's that. Would you take Ronald Jones or Philip Lindsay before rookies like Akers and Dobbins, Swift, Akers, and Dobbins? In Dynasty, I will, absolutely would not, and I probably would not in redraft either. Ronald Jones, maybe. Probably not Philip Lindsay. I think I'd take all those guys ahead of Lindsay. Emil?
I agree. I would. Lindsay is on the bottom of that list, and I think I've got Akers and Swift a little higher than Jones, but not much. Dobbins is a very intriguing guy that I just worry a little bit about. When's he going to get the opportunity there? But so I would probably do Swift and Akers over Jones, and then maybe after Jones I have Dobbs very closely behind, and unfortunately I got Lindsay a little farther down behind all of those guys.
All right, Keeper League. He asked about last week. This is Nike J24. I recall that somewhat. Kept Barkley and Connor, 12-team league. He drafted fifth, took Miles Sanders, kind of got flustered before being that pick, hate the middle picks, no snake drafts. I thought it was a great pick. I think that's – look, if I had those three running backs and to build around, and I'd feel pretty comfortable with that. So we've hit the hour mark, guys. If you have any more questions, throw them in, and gals. We appreciate you coming. We know drafts are coming, so hit the website. I know we'll check that Clyde Edwards-Helaire rankings and the staff cheat sheet, but in the meantime, I think you'll see Emil and I both have them ranked fairly highly. And just footballdiehards.com/free trial if you're not familiar with what we're doing. If you want to check out the configurable cheat sheet and all the things we have there, news, notes, information, videos, the Fantasy University with all kinds of online lessons and talks from experienced fantasy professionals who will help you figure out what you need to do. We have it all. And next week we'll start the Flash Update, our regular season product with the My Fantasy GM. That'll help you win your leagues with less work. And then by less work, I mean the management end of things. I'm in 20-some leagues. I'm going to be able to go in there, draw in all my rosters, all my opponents' rosters, and all those leagues I'm in across a range of platforms, whether it's CBS, My Fantasy League, ESPN, etc., the Sleeper app, and bring them all in and evaluate what your needs are for free agents, help you optimize lineups, help you assess what your opponents are doing so you can kind of have an edge on that. So Great stuff there. So check it out, footballdiehards.com/free trial. If you already seen it and you want to buy it, use the promo code Diehards for a 15% discount. Subscribe to this channel. We'll be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. with a mock draft. I see one more question. Rest of draft, A. Robinson, T.Y. Hilton, DJ Chark, Jared Cook, Will Fuller. Yes, you have a pretty good draft there, Nike J24. I think you did well considering you have those 3 running backs. That was a great draft, man. Robbie Anderson,
an excellent draft.
2 good quarterbacks. One more stab at running back 2. Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, Bell, or Gurley. I like them Gurley, Johnson, Bell, Gordon. In that order is how I rank them. Emil?
Yep, that's the way I have them ranked too. I have Bell and David Johnson really close to each other.
All right, everybody, once again, back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. We'll have a mock draft going and the analysis that goes with it. We'll be back again Friday for another Ask Me Anything as your drafts draw nearer. Keep that in mind. Hit the subscription and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get notifications and whatnot. We'll be back, and we'll. Thanks, Nike. Appreciate that. I hope we see you all throughout the season. Lots of videos throughout the season as well that we do. A weekly injury update. We have live videos Wednesdays and Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings. Help you do DFS lineups, etc. So lots going on during the season. So thanks everybody for coming. We'll talk to you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern,